A non-stop flight, especially in the aviation industry, is a flight by an aircraft with no intermediate stops. Ultra-long-haul non-stop flights. An ultra-long-haul non-stop flight is a flight by a commercially operated airliner with no scheduled intermediate stop of any kind, a route length over 7,500 miles. These flights usually follow a Great Circle route, often passing over polar regions. As of February 2014, the longest non-stop scheduled airline flight only operates non-stop in one direction from Australia to North America, and the return flight has a scheduled intermediate stop for refueling. However, this is the only ultra-long-haul flight to operate as such, with all others being non-stop in both directions. Time determinants. Along with the chosen cruising airspeed, the time taken by a flight depends mainly on the speed and direction of the winds at flight level, which can result in a tailwind, headwind, or crosswind at various points of the flight, ATC route. Flights crossing the middle latitudes often encounter the jet stream, which typically flows in a general eastward direction. As a result, flights traveling from west to east often experience a tailwind and have flight times that are considerably shorter than for flights traveling from east to west, which experience a headwind. Flight schedules account for this effect in an average sense, but when the jet stream is stronger or weaker than normal, or takes an unusual direction, large differences can occur from scheduled flight times. Records. In December 1957, an ELA Britannia flew the longest flight by any commercial airline on the New York-Tel Aviv route with a flying time of 14 hours and 46 minutes, at an average speed of 645 km per hour, and in January 1958, an ELA Britannia broke its own speed record with a flight time of 7 hours and 44 minutes on the non-stop New York-London route. In 1961, an Al Boeing 707 flying from New York to Tel Aviv set 3 world records, the fastest flight, the first non-stop service on that route and the world unregistered trademark's longest non-stop commercial flight. In August 1967, Aerolíneas Argentinas established their non-stop plus ultra service between Madrid and Buenos Aires. With a flight time of 12 hours, the Boeing 707-based service was the longest ever scheduled flight until the Boeing 747 SP entered service in 1976. Iran Air began its scheduled non-stop service between New York and Tehran using its newly acquired long-range Boeing 747 SPs, completing the eastward journey in 11 hours 15 minutes. Although the airline planned a non-stop Tehran-Los Angeles flight, it never materialized due to the 1979 Iranian Revolution. The flight would have made a leap in the time and distance records. The Tehran-New York flight was suspended in November 1979. In April 1976, Pan Am set a new record for longest non-stop scheduled flight with its New York-Tokyo route. In December the airline set another record with Sydney-San Francisco, covering 11,937 kilometers. Both routes were flown by Boeing 747 SP aircraft. In May 1988 the ELA began its long-haul passenger flight from Tel Aviv to Los Angeles, completing its journey in 13 hours 41 minutes. In modern-day aviation, in August 1989 the first Qantas Boeing 747-438 set a new distance record for a commercial aircraft by flying non-stop between London and Sydney. The flight covered the distance of 18,001 kilometers in 20 hours and 9 minutes, and served the dual purpose of delivering the airplane from Boeing to Qantas in Australia and creating publicity for the airline's long-reach services with the 747-400. This is followed more recently by Singapore Airlines introducing ultra-long-haul flights on February 3, 2004 to Los Angeles, and on June 28, 2004 to Newark from Singapore Changi Airport. These two flights held the record for the longest commercial passenger non-stop flights in the world based on both time and distance, until both routes were cancelled in October and November 2013, respectively. The route from New York City to Hong Kong is the longest non-stop route in the world to be served by more than one airline. The routes served between Los Angeles and Sydney have the maximum number of airlines operating non-stop flights in the ultra-long-haul category: 4 Aerolíneas Delta Airlines, Qantas, Virgin Australia, and United Airlines. In terms of flight frequency, Emirates tops the list of ultra-long-haul flight operators, with 6 flights operating from its Dubai base to Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, Los Angeles, Sao Paulo, San Francisco, and Seattle. On November 9, 2005, a Boeing 777-200LR, dubbed the Worldliner, completed the world's longest non-stop passenger flight. It traveled 13,423 mi eastward, as opposed to a normal westward routing for that sector, which is much shorter at 9,647 km, from Hong Kong to London, in roughly 22 hours 22 minutes. Aboard the 777-200LR were 8 pilots including Susanna Darcy Henneman, Boeing's first female test pilot. Although the airplane seats 301, there were only 27 passengers aboard this flight. There were 2 Boeing executives, several Boeing 777 engineers, representatives from General Electric, and a dozen journalists from around the world. The aircraft belonged to PIA, Commander Asif Reza, Senior Vice President Flight Operations. PIA, was in command and assisted by Captain Mohammed Elias Malik, designated as check pilot Boeing 777 and PIA, to fly the aircraft as Boeing's launch customer, pending delivery of this very first plane to PIA, registered in Pakistan APBGY. This was not, however, the record for longest time aloft for an airliner. This debatable record is claimed either by the 1939 Berlin-New York non-stop flight of a reciprocal piston-powered Focke-Wulf FW200 built for Deutsche Lufthansa or by a Trans World Airlines Lockheed L-1649 Starliner on the inaugural London-San Francisco polar route on 1 October 2, 1957. The L-1649A was the last of the Constellation series, and the ultimate piston engine airliner in terms of range and endurance. However, from 1943 to 1945 Qantas operated a weekly return flight from Western Australia to Sri Lanka with flight times 28 to €33h. This was called the Double Sunrise service. The aircraft used was the consolidated PBY Catalina. Longest flights. The following table lists the world's longest non-stop scheduled passenger routes in distance order. City pairs may be served using different routings on the return journey, which may therefore involve different route length and journey times. Weather conditions, particularly the direction of jet streams, also have a significant impact on the time needed to complete the journey. For example, Singapore Airlines Flight 21 from Newark to Singapore followed a 15,753 km Great Circle route within 70 nautical miles of the geographic North Pole, while its return flight, Flight 22, was a 16,600 km route via Asia and Alaska. The Singapore to Los Angeles route on Singapore Airlines was scheduled for 16 hours 30 minutes in summer and 15 hours 35 minutes in winter. On the return trip, the flight was scheduled for 17 hours 20 minutes in summer and 18 hours 5 minutes in winter. Because Europe is at the center of the land hemisphere, the distances from Europe to the largest cities in North-South America, Africa and Asia are shorter than the flights below. The distance from Europe to Australia and New Zealand is longer than the flights on the list, but there are no non-stop flights between these continents at present. Currently, all of the top 16 flights departs from or arrives at one of 9 cities in North America. Further, all but one of the top 30 have one terminus in North America. Boeing is currently the dominant manufacturer in the ultra-long-haul aircraft segment, with 25 of the 30 longest non-stop flights being operated by Boeing airliners such as the 777-300ER, 777-200LR and the 747-400ER. Currently scheduled, for the purposes of this table, multiple frequencies operated by the same airline between the same airports is counted as one flight, while different airlines operating between the same airports are counted separately. Also, each airport pair is counted separately, even though some cities have multiple airports supporting long-range flights. Discontinued, airlines and aircraft types for non-stop flights. The sections below gives 2 separate views. The first one lists all the commercial aircraft types used for serving non-stop flights and their currently scheduled and operating longest flight. The second section attempts to list all the passenger airline companies in the world and their longest scheduled non-stop flight currently in operation. By aircraft type, the table below lists the longest non-stop flights operated by different types of aircraft. By airline companies, the table below lists international airline companies with their longest non-stop flight currently in operation. Future of ultra-long haul. The longest non-stop flights currently running are not the longest city pairs theoretically possible. Flights on the Kangaroo route, if flown non-stop, would exceed 17,000 kilometers. The longest routes possible are between antipodes, or points on the Earth's surface opposite each other with the Earth's center directly between, a distance of 20,038 km at the equator. Flights between Buenos Aires and Shanghai, Quito and Kuala Lumpur, Wellington and Madrid, Perth and Bermuda or Asuncion and Taipei have a distance of flight at 19,602 km, 19,715 km, 19,851 km, 19,918 km, and 19,933 km respectively. A theoretical non-stop flight between Mar-a-Lago and Auckland, which are nearly antipodal, would cover a great circle distance of flight at 19,943 km. Singapore Airlines announced the termination of its ultra-long-haul non-stop flights to Los Angeles and Newark in late 2013, after Airbus agreed to buy back the carrier's 5 A340-500s. It is believed that these services continue to fall short of revenue expectations, despite the airline switching to an ALA Euro business class cabin layout. The Boeing 777-200LR airliner can cover the distance between antipodes with no payload, but its range decreases significantly with the added weight of cargo and passengers. As of 2009, no airline has plans to introduce a non-stop service longer than the Singapore Euro-Newark run, though both Airbus and Boeing have hinted at interest in developing variants to their long-haul airliners to make a London-Euro-Sydney non-stop flight economically feasible, for which purpose the Airbus consortium will offer the special Airbus A350-900 or XWB variant to British Airways. The Great Circle distance between London Heathrow Airport and Sydney Airport is 16,995 km. On November 2013, Boeing officially launched the 777X program, with the Boeing 777-8X capable of traveling 9,300 nautical miles. The 777X is scheduled to enter service in 2020. The length of flights using current operational procedures would still limited by flight planning considerations including having sufficient reserve fuel for adverse weather, holding, an alternate airport and restrictions like ETOPS, which would reduce potential flying distances. Other proposals include utilization of point-to-point suborbital spaceflight for the ultra-long-haul distances. Shortest flights. The following table lists the shortest non-stop scheduled passenger routes per airline. Compare, direct flight, see also. Domestic flight, flight length, ETOPS LROPS, international flight, longest train journeys, flight distance record, mainline, world's busiest passenger air routes, references. External links, Understanding Travel's Peak.